Hey, and welcome to this week's Nurture Notes, where we are in Luke 21. So if you're new here, then thanks for being here. My name is Naomi Aidoo. I'm an author, Bible teacher, coach, and YouVersion partner. And we are exploring the Gospel of Luke. We're nearing the end now, so you can go back through all the YouTube videos and go right back to the beginning. And we are currently in Luke 21. Every week on Monday, I share a new nurture note which will support us in going and growing towards what it is that Jesus is calling us to. And if that sounds like the sort of thing that you are interested in, whether you're new here or you've been watching a while and haven't yet hit that subscribe button, please do so, because it means more than you know, and it doesn't take you very long, but it's really significant for creators like me who are out here sharing things like this. So, Luke 21. To set the scene, we are back where we were last week in Luke 20 as we look to Jesus teaching, Jesus sharing on all sorts of topics, and ultimately, which we'll get into in a little while, because he knows that he's nearing the end for him. He's nearing what is going to be his crucifixion, which we know will then become resurrection and ascension. But he knows that his time on earth, as it were, as a human, as a man, is short. And so he's teaching every day. He's there and he's sharing. And that's where we pick up today in Luke 21. We look first to the widow's offering. And although we're not really going to dwell on that today, it kind of sets the scene and opens up the fact that we are still in the temple with Jesus. But he goes on to then talk about the fact that some of his, well, it actually says in verse 5, some of his disciples were remarking about how the temple was adorned with beautiful stones and with gifts dedicated to God. But Jesus says, verse 6, as for what you see here, the time will come when not one stone will be left on another. Every one of them will be thrown down. And at first reading, it seems like a bit of a harsh response from Jesus. It's like, we're just talking about the fact the temple looked nice. It's a building that has that worship to God at the forefront of its creation, its design. And Jesus is kind of like, anyway, that isn't what is important. And it goes back to this theme of preoccupation, which, although I might not have said the word, is definitely something that comes up a lot in the previous chapter in verse 20, particularly when the Sadducees were talking to Jesus about resurrection, because they didn't believe in it, and they were talking to him about marriage. And in the Message paraphrase of the Bible, there's actually a part within that says marriage is a preoccupation here. And I think that there's still that theme that Jesus is kind of touching on, the notion that marriage is a bit of a preoccupation. This building that you're talking about now and the stones is a bit of a preoccupation. And so when we look at Jesus through the lens of purpose, I think it really changes things. It helps us to think through why some of these blunt, seemingly harsh statements were being made by Jesus, because actually it's because he knows what he's here for. He knows what he needs to share, what he needs to do, and as a result, there's an urgency about his tone. If we remember back in Luke chapter 9, and I've alluded to this a number of times, I think, throughout this series, but there's that verse that talks about the fact that Jesus set his face towards Jerusalem, set his face towards purpose, ultimately where he was going to go. And because of that, when there's this mention of the stones in the temple and all of this stuff, it's not like it's wrong, it's not like it's bad even, but Jesus is kind of almost like, that's not the point, so to speak. What is the point is everything that he goes on to talk about thereafter. Throughout the rest, really, of Luke chapter 21, he talks about the end times. He talks about the fact that there will be death and destruction, rejection, and I don't doubt that he's also thinking about that, the fact that also happened to him and what that looked like for himself as he was pursuing his purpose. He knows what awaits him, yet he continues to teach, he continues to share, because it's part of his purpose. But he was still fully human. He was fully human and fully God. and he was to continue to do what it was that he was called to do on the earth, which was to redeem and to save the lost, and then to die that he might rise, beat death, and save us. But the fact that he was human means that it didn't lessen the emotional weight that it would take to talk about these themes, to talk about the end times and ultimately the difficulties that will be faced by many in that moment. And so he's persisting, he's talking about it, but that's not essentially to the detriment of himself and his ultimate well-being, which we'll find out now as we kind of land in where we want to land this message today. If we skip down to verses 37 and 38, it says, "Each day Jesus was teaching at the temple, and each evening he went out to spend the night on a hill called the Mount of Olives. And all the people came early in the morning to hear him at the temple." Jesus had a rhythm. Jesus had a rhythm of rest, retreat, and restoration, because it was so significant that if he was to pour out the way that he was in his teaching and in his sharing, particularly around some of the themes which he was teaching and sharing on, he needed that rhythm of replenishment. And I think it's just important for us to pause here for a moment and recognize that if Jesus, the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, needed that in the midst of however busy he was, because let's face it, he was doing a lot, he knew that there still needed to be that rhythm of time spent with his Father. And that's what happened. Each night there was that retreat and rest, and then each day it was the pouring out. I think that we can pour out and sort of preserve ourselves a lot less when we recognize that we've got rhythms in place that also support our own well-being and our own rest. And so rather perhaps than fearing pouring out and giving more of yourself when it comes to the things that you're being called to do, ask yourselves what rhythm and what boundary you can put in place in order to ensure that you maintain that well-being. In fact, in the verses 34 to 36, Jesus warns and commands, I would say, three things. He's saying to watch your own heart, because he's talking about essentially the fact that the cares of the world can just creep up on us. And so he says, watch your own heart, stay spiritually awake and pray continually. And that's in verses 34 to 36, before we read of his own personal rhythm. Those aren't commands that are kind of just like abstract and out there. Those are things that I believe protect us from dulling our purpose. And as Jesus was resolved around what his purpose was, he needed to be continually replenished in order to allow for that to be fulfilled. And the same, of course, if it was significant for Jesus, can be said for us. If we think about what he was modeling here, he wasn't just teaching like watchfulness, he was practicing it through that withdrawal, through that intimacy, that prayer and that rest. And if we are also to pursue purpose, to do what it is that we're called to do in the world, which are so many amazing things, it's really significant that we also recognize what our rhythms for rest, retreat, restoration and replenishment are. If Jesus needed this, how much more do we need this? And so notice this week where you need to step back, stay awake and be mindful of God and what he's calling you to do, where he's calling you to be. Note that this isn't out of pressure, but it's out of purpose, that purposeful rhythm that Jesus so beautifully models for us. And so I hope that that has served you today. Don't forget to like and subscribe, because it really does mean a lot, and it just supports the channel. If you just click a like, if you hit subscribe, all of those things show that it's content that you enjoy, and for that I am grateful. Enjoy the rest of your week. God bless. Keep going. Keep growing.